So, when you think of God's throne, what's the first image that comes to mind? For most of us, it's probably this huge, majestic seat up in the heavens. But what if the Quran itself is painting a totally different picture? Today, we're going to dig in and ask a really simple question. What does the Quranic text itself have to say about the divine throne, or Arsh? Right, this is the image we're all familiar with, the one we've inherited. It's this idea of a literal, physical throne, a magnificent, cosmic piece of furniture. It's a really powerful image, no doubt, but is that really the picture the Quran is giving us? And that's the core question, isn't it? To get to the bottom of this, we're going to do a purely textual investigation. We're going to set aside all the inherited imagery, all the external ideas, and just see what meaning emerges when we let the Quranic text speak for itself. Okay, so how do we actually do that? Well, our whole investigation is going to hinge on a fundamental principle of studying the Quran. It's what gives us our ground rules. And that principle is tasrif. The idea is simple, but it's powerful. The Quran is its own best dictionary. By looking at how a word is used every single time it appears, a consistent internal meaning starts to reveal itself. So for this explainer, the Quran is our one and only source of evidence. And here's our game plan for the word Arsh. It's a straightforward four-step process. First, we'll check out the root of the word. Then, we'll see how it's used for humans to get a sort of baseline. After that, we'll compare it to how it's used for God. And finally, we'll see what kind of pattern emerges from the text. All right, let's jump right into the investigation. We're on the hunt for the Quran's own definition of Arsh, and our very first clue is buried in the foundation of the word itself. So the root meaning of Arsh gives us our first major hint. Before it even means throne, it just refers to a supporting structure or framework. The Quran actually uses it to talk about trellises that hold up grapevines or the foundational roofs of a building. So the core idea isn't about sitting at all. It's about the framework that supports a whole system. That's a really key distinction to keep in mind. Now, let's establish our baseline. The Quran gives us a perfect case study to work with, the Queen of Sheba. The text says very clearly that she has a great arsh. This is our reference point, right? It shows us how the word is used in a very real, human, political context. And the story of the Queen of Sheba in Surah An-Naml gives us some really concrete details. We learn that her arsh is a physical object. It can be moved, it can even be disguised. But most importantly, it's the absolute symbol of her power. It's her seat of sovereignty. So yeah, in the human context, Arsh definitely refers to a physical throne that represents authority. But here's where it gets really interesting. This is the crucial point. When the exact same word, Arsh, is used for a law, all of those physical descriptions just vanish. The Quran never once tells us what it's made of, how big it is, or where exactly it is. That silence is absolutely deafening, and it's probably our biggest clue that we might be dealing with something that isn't a physical object at all. And you see this conceptual idea reinforced in a key phrase that pops up 6 times, Istawa ala al-Arsh. Now, a very literal translation might suggest sitting on the throne, but the verb istawa is used in other parts of the Quran to mean things like to become established or to assume control. This points away from a physical action and directly toward a declaration, the act of establishing sovereign authority over all of creation. Okay, so let's quickly sum up the evidence for Arsh. The traditional view paints a picture of a giant physical throne being carried by angels, but the Quran's own textual pattern points to Arsh being more like the command center of the universe, the regulatory framework. And its carriers? Well, they seem to be the forces or agents that uphold and execute the laws of that divine system. It's a huge shift from cosmic furniture to cosmic function. All right, let's bring in our next major piece of evidence, the word Kursi. Now, this word is often linked with the throne, and it's usually translated as a seat or maybe a footstool. But you'll see the Quran uses it in a very specific and pretty revealing way. So here's what makes this word so incredibly important. Unlike Arsh, which shows up dozens of times, the word Kursi in this divine context appears exactly once, just one time in the entire Quran. That kind of rarity is a huge signal from the text that we need to pay very close attention to its specific context. And here it is, in one of the most well-known verses in the entire book, Ayat al-Kursi. The text doesn't say that God sits on the Kursi, it says his Kursi wasi'a.
It encompasses, it contains, it extends over the entirety of the heavens and the earth. The whole emphasis is on its scope and its incredible reach.
And you know what? The Quran itself gives us the linguistic key to unlock this. It uses the exact same verb, wasi'a, to describe two different things. In verse 225, the Kursi encompasses all of creation. And then in 789, we read that God's knowledge encompasses all things. The text is drawing a direct, undeniable parallel between the Kursi and all-encompassing knowledge. And this makes perfect sense when you just step back and look at the whole verse. I mean, what's it talking about? It's a list of non-physical, absolute attributes. He is the ever-living, he's never overcome by sleep, he owns everything in existence, his knowledge is total. A physical seat or a footstool would just feel completely out of place in a list of these abstract, all-encompassing concepts. So now that we've laid out the evidence for both Arsh and Kursi, we can finally bring it all together and reach our verdict. And this is where the complete picture really snaps into focus. Arsh is the concept of supreme sovereignty. It's the who is in charge. And Kursi is the concept of encompassing governance. It's the how that rule is carried out, through total knowledge and control. They aren't two different pieces of furniture. They are two distinct aspects of divine rule.
So, what the Quran seems to be doing is using words we can understand, like throne and seat, to help us grasp these profound non-physical realities. Arsh points to God's absolute sovereignty, while Kursi signifies the all-encompassing governance that puts that sovereignty into action. The ultimate message here isn't about cosmic architecture. It's about the very nature of God's active, dynamic relationship with all of creation.
And that leaves us with one final thought to ponder. When we shift our understanding away from a God sitting on a piece of cosmic furniture and toward a God whose sovereignty and governance are active, all-encompassing functions of reality itself, how does that change our perception of and our relationship with the Creator?